Right, I think we're. I think we're kind of good to start. It's 11 o'clock, and we're going to try and keep this workshop session to sort of 30 minutes, if we can. We did start one, or we did do one last week, and it went on quite some time. So we're going to try and keep this one concise. But if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to ask as we go along. We'd like this to be a kind of a conversational workshop and webinar rather than just us talking at you. So feel free, please, to interject with any questions. So the topic for today, we're workshop 2 out of 6, is using downturn to improve your product. We're going to run through a quick agenda now, and I'll introduce you to the hosts. So first of all, me, Darren, I'm the CEO of Talent in the Cloud, involved in a couple of other NGOs as well here on the continent, based in Cape Town. Next, we have Piotr from Opera Software, and I'm going to let Piotr do a quick introduction as well. And then following that from Simon from FinTechable. So Piotr, over to you. Would you like to give a quick introduction, tell everyone a little bit about you and your background?
Sure. Thanks, Dan, for introduction and welcome everyone. My name is Piotr. I worked for a couple of years in one of the biggest banks in Europe, ING. And now I moved to Opera, where we are building the fintech products in a typical IT company. And today I will present you a couple of nice examples how you can use a negative situation on the markets to profit and to change your product.
Wonderful. Thanks, Piotr. Simon.
Hi, Darren, and hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Simon Hardy, the founder of a business called Findexable. We're building a real-time global index and database of fintech companies, working with various partners globally across Africa and other regions, as well as some big data businesses to create a real-time index that will indicate emerging pockets of talent, emerging companies and innovations in fintech around the world, and we'll be launching that in the next month with our data partner in the US, Crunchbase.
Fantastic. And Simon, you're hosting another webinar later on this week. Maybe we can talk about that towards the end of this. And,
yeah, absolutely.
Tell people how we can sign up to it. That's great. And, Piotr, you're based in Poland as well. We've got a bit of a global audience. I'm here in Cape Town. Simon's in Israel at the moment, and Piotr's in Poland. So we're kind of quite dispersed. So running through the agenda, I'll talk you through very quickly the 6-week series, which we started last week. We're going to talk about why now is a great time to revamp or launch a new product. And again, this is specific to fintech and payments. We are going to spend some time talking about great teams, how great products come from great teams. That's something as a subject that's very close to my heart. And Piotr's got some really good examples of that. And a very interesting case study of a Paytm. I'm not going to spoil it because there's some really interesting learnings from that, see what that company did during the last couple of downturns and how they've emerged to what they are today. And then we're going to be sharing some recommendations and tips for anyone here that's involved in product management or the product life cycle. The gentlemen here are very, very kind to share some tips and recommendations for you. So the 6-week series, as I mentioned last week, we kicked off with a rather lengthy workshop. It was about an hour and a half. So if you've got some spare time, actually everyone's got some spare time at the moment, pop over to YouTube and have a look. We'll be following up with an email later anyway. But that was all about increasing transaction volumes and retaining your merchants. There was some amazing nuggets of information there from Andreas from Peach Payments and again from Simon, who gave us a much more sort of global view on what the market was doing at the moment. Today we're talking about how to improve product. Next week is a fantastic webinar. I'm really excited about this one. This is with Nick Small of Apis Partners. We're going to be talking about retaining control of your business. And it's not just necessarily payments businesses, but certainly fintech business as well. And that's from private equity, expert in private equity. Nick's the MD of Apis, and they've got a huge portfolio, including the DPO group, innovation, and a host of others here on the continent. Then we're going to be doing a game plan. So this is really how to ready your business for the upturn, not only product, but the entire business. So from sales and marketing to comms and PR. We're joined by Patrick Ryan from Mobius Consulting. Then we're going to talk about, on our sort of penultimate workshop series, is how to secure your team. So, you know, people are going through some very, very challenging times. Businesses are going through some very, very challenging times. But how do we make sure that we're retaining, or you're retaining, you know, your best employees and your best team? And then finally, with George Anderson, who anyone on this call was at the Money 2020 event last year, may have heard George presenting to a very, very large audience, all about resilience. And George has actually been a coach of mine for the last year. And he's he's going to be joining us to do a whole session on building resilience and how to improve culture using a resilient approach. That's a really interesting one as well. So what I wanted to start off with, and I'm going to just probably scoot over this rather quickly, because if you wanted to have, or you want to give more insight onto this, the first webinar that we ran, we spent about half an hour talking about the state of play of the current global payments industry. But ultimately, you know, some key challenges here, looking at the payment sector itself, you know, there are estimates that, you know, $210 billion of lost revenue could be reported for this year. You know, big movement in terms of point of sale systems. You know, there was a report here by our friends over at Yoko that on the day of lockdown, you know, they saw a 90% drop in transaction volumes. And, you know, there are some various other sort of challenges that we're all experiencing. Piotr, Simon, from your side, again, I don't want to spend too long on talking about the negatives, but is there anything pertinent you think it's worth talking about or mentioning now?
Yeah, I can pick up one of them if I may. One example, I think it's really rise in contactless payments, especially now in Europe with all the situation that we are having right now. Both the governments and the private banks are promoting card payments and also contactless payments, just to limit the number of touch points, to not touch the point of sale machines and also ATMs. So this is something that some of the banks promote very heavily, and also even some of them are giving for free the debit cards to their customers who are not used to use them. So I think we will see in general a lower number of cash used, but definitely higher use of payment cards. And this is what we already see in Europe, which is, I think, a positive step towards the cashless society.
Yeah, I think that's right, Piotr. I mean, I think, you know, from all of these challenges that you've got here, Darren, I mean, it strikes me that, you know, obviously, you know, we're still in the middle of it, so it is early days, and it's foolish to make predictions. But there are going to be, you know, for the purpose of the call today, you know, there are going to be a series of, call them challenges, but ultimately changes to the way people think and use financial services, whether it's a business or a consumer. You know, challenges that are going to outlast the crisis. So, you know, it's really just about sort of looking at the range of, you know, of things that are happening and trying to kind of, you know, plot out, you know, what is going to live longer, you know, what things like contactless, as Piotr mentioned, are going to get a kind of boost, you know, certainly in new markets as well as existing, and see, you know, how does that then inform, you know, your product, particularly if you're thinking about, you know, or have a proof of concept that you're trying to deliver or develop now. You know, it's a good time to look at the range of things that are happening and see how you build them in.
Absolutely. And we spoke about some of the positive side, and Piotr, you mentioned, you know, contactless and trying to move away from cash. I mean, that's obviously a great thing for the sector, for, you know, fintech and payments. That's what we've all been, I suppose, harping on about for many years. About, you know, the battle or the competition for fintechs isn't necessarily other fintechs or banks. Actually, it's cash. So I suppose we're starting to see a bit of a move to that. So maybe that's a positive sign for us as an industry. You know, we look at UnionPay, and I know we're going to talk about Paytm later, but we look at UnionPay now. You know, they've actually seen an increase on things as well. And if you look at sort of online payment transactions, a massive increase in China, nearly 50% compared to the same period as last year. It'd be interesting to see how that number is reflected here, certainly on the African continent, but perhaps also in Europe as well. I think we should move on. There is a question, sorry, from Cleo. Can we share the presentation off the webinar? Yes, absolutely. We'll be sending an email around with the deck and with a recording of this as well. But what we wanted to talk about today and why Piotr has been kind enough to join this webinar. Piotr has recently joined Opera Software, heading up their fintech portfolio across Europe. We wanted to talk about just taking advantage, but using this time sensibly to revamp or relaunch a product. And why is this a great time? And I think when I first approached Piotr last week and we were having a chat about this, my thought process was, this is a great time. Everyone's going to be, consumers are going to be at home. It's going to be easy to get in front of consumers and to get some feedback and to do workshops. But I was quite surprised, Piotr, if we can have a bit of a live conversation here. You kind of challenged me on that and said, well, yeah, I think that's fine, but whilst people are at home, it's very difficult to get reactions on the UX and the UI when you're looking at getting consumer feedback. Kind of fascinating, because I didn't really think about that. It'd be great to hear kind of in your own words what you meant, and perhaps you can sort of talk that by the audience as well.
Sure, Darren. Yeah, exactly. This is what I see and what I encounter already. Of course, we are living in the world when we build the digital products, and we have digital online onboardings of the customer. He doesn't need to go to the branch or any physical place to open an account. He can make a lot of things online, and totally he doesn't need even to contact the customer support. But and we can always test it. And like Darren mentioned, it's very easy now to find the testers online. I discuss it with our partner UX Studio, that number of people who are signing up for online tests, it's tremendously bigger than before the lockdown. So people are sitting at home. They're also looking for additional source of income. So those kind of online tests of user interfaces that are doable from home. But the problem that I am facing, and I think I will have it in the next upcoming weeks, that I cannot test everything through internet browser. Really, the biggest impact have those small things, how people react, how people interact with your app, how they interact with your product. And this is something that even if you will observe those testers on the webcam, you will not get the feeling, you will not get their impression from interacting with your product. So this is something that I think I will miss a lot, and currently we cannot create the focus groups. A lot of companies are refusing to make focus groups to gather people in one place because it's forbidden. So we can still create the products, we can still test them, but I believe that they will miss this kind of human touch, meaning how to create this story around the product, because we are unable to test it really fully. So I think this is the biggest challenge that we have right now, especially for the new products. When you are in the moment when you create the story around the product, you want to see the pains and what kind of gains the customer get, and you will never get it from the online form or online test. You just need to meet with those people, look into their eyes, and see how they react to your product. So I think this will be the big challenge for creating and launching the new products in the current times, definitely.
Great. And off the back of that, Piotr, you mentioned about it might be quite difficult to get that feedback from focus groups or not necessarily testers, but focus groups. What would you recommend that product owners and people involved in product development look at now? Is it moving more towards something that's agile, that can be tweaked and can be yeah, I suppose tweaked. I'm trying to think of a better word, but can be modified at a later date. I guess it's going to be a little bit difficult because it's kind of thumb sucking a little bit. Yes,
definitely. And we all would like to have this crystal ball to see what's happened in the next 2, 3, or 4 months even. But this is something that a lot of companies are doing right now. Usually you need to create a couple of different versions of your product and different scenarios, what will happen. But usually they are based on the MVP results, right? You create an MVP, you put on the market and see how the customers react, what kind of things are missing, what things are nice to have, which one are like you need to have, because not everything you will get from the research. But now you need to adjust it not only to the customer needs, but also to the market. And some of the things that before the virus were feasible and they were doable right now, probably they are not even feasible, or you cannot even do it. Many countries, for example, they are not allowing you to do different things, setting up new entities and so on. So I believe that you need to be really flexible or agile, call it how you want it, with the product. And it's really hard right now to put the product and set it in stone in the requirements, what kind of thing we release in June or August or even September. Anything that is released this year, I think needs to take into account this changing environment, and not only the virus, but also the impact it has on the government, on the regulation, and what kind of restrictions the governments are putting on the citizens, and in the way to check if those restrictions are also not limiting your future product.
Sure. Simon, have you got some views on this as well?
Well, I certainly agree that it is exceedingly difficult, to do business in the sense that digitally it's great, but as you say, you can't get the qualitative feedback. And I think also, this is a challenging time in the sense that you can't do business because you can't go and meet somebody to have to get that interaction. But I do think at the same time, now is a really good time just to sort of take stock. It's unsatisfactory, but it is a good. I do think it is a great time to take stock of what you've got, where you are, in terms of your business, and what how you might tweak it, pivot it, whatever you want to call it. But what might be the way to revamp it so that you can come out of this in good shape. I think the timeline is the challenging bit. If we think now that it's sounding like airlines are expecting to kind of resume business flights in sort of similar numbers to pre-pandemic around the summertime, then I think really you've got to think about the next 3 months as a time to analyze what the opportunities are, and how that applies to your product, and how that applies to how you think about your business and your business planning. But I think ultimately there is an opportunity to use more access to people's time because they're online more. But I have to agree with Piotr that there's a limit on how far one might get. I think also because people are thinking about costs, and whether it's the end user or a bank intermediary, technology partner, customer, or an investor. Everybody's also thinking. Everyone's extremely cost conscious. So I think you've got to handle that sort of thing quite. That whole kind of product development versus launch versus sort of business and financing thing quite carefully, and also quite sensitively when it comes to your sort of end customer or partner, or target customer or partner.
I think it's very difficult to kind of future-proof any product, right, or any business. But what do you think we can learn from what's happened? I mean, this thing, came from literally from nowhere, right? Caught us all off guard, and it's had a huge impact. So, are there any lessons we can learn, or businesses can learn from this in terms of being able to have kind of future-proof, and I'll put that in sort of inverted commas, products and services?
Well, no, I'd say one thing, which is, when your premise for today is don't let a good crisis go to waste, and that's absolutely perfect. That is exactly the question that it's a statement one should be making. If you think about, not 2008, but the dot-com crash, a lot of technology companies were in a similar stage. Amazon survived because of the kind of the weight of money that it had behind it, but a lot of companies failed because they were going for growth at any at any cost, and the fundamentals underneath were dodgy at best. So I think in terms of learnings, it's really about one is, are you building a solution? Are you building a product for which there is actually a solution needed? It's to go back to that kind of original first question that we ask ourselves when we're trying to do something. And then I think also it's really about preparedness. I mean, I think again, your series and the one that we've the webinar that you and I will be doing tomorrow is to look at business resilience and think, well, it can't possibly be that in an increasingly digital age we don't have the tools to hand to avoid the massive catastrophe, economic catastrophe, certainly at the small and mid-sized or scaling business end of things, that we don't have the tools to be able to be either be better prepared or at least have some sort of early warning system, particularly with all the data, the data that's being formed and the data sharing that's sort of starting to take place. So I think it's about preparedness, but it's also about can we be better prepared with some sort of early warning system or better analytics to make sure that we more companies in future don't fall into the same traps.
I agree. Piotr, anything to add on that? Because it's quite a pertinent point.
I think on top of that, I would add that if something we cannot predict, of course, a lot of things we can predict. And the example of financial crisis in 2008, it was months of signals that something going wrong. So you could prepare for that. And unfortunately, big banks, they haven't. But in case when something happens and you cannot predict, like the virus, then I think you need to really be agile and flexible. And I have one example, totally not from the digital world. What's happening with the courier companies who are now booming e-commerce and sending the products around the country? What kind of companies are helping them? A lot of companies who are having VIP services for the airport, they have this really nice cars with leather seats inside. And what they are doing right now to adjust to the situation, they take out those leather seats that are very expensive. And instead of putting the VIPs and the guests and the ambassadors, they are going through the city with the packages and delivering the packages. And now they are using the cars that they have on lease. They bring the work to the customers, only the target is different. So this really nicely shows how you can really change. You still have very similar product, but you just transport something else and you adjust to the current situation.
Yeah, for sure. And let's go on to the next point, because I think that's that sort of whole idea about a pivot, and that's probably not going to be a long term, but that's a short term solution to staying in business for a lot of individuals and obviously the courier company themselves. So that comes from a great team, and we spoke quite a bit last week, Piotr, about adjusting to working remotely, and I know Opera is probably a slight exception, given it's so disparate. You've got people across the planet. But when it comes to product teams tend to be, certainly on the African continent, tend to be quite traditional in the sense that there is a physical team of people sitting in one part of a payments business or a fintech, and having that real world and real life discussion with the whole team. When you take that remotely, and with no planning, a lot of most businesses here have no. Again, completely caught off guard. So, from being in the office to then being at home literally within a day or two, how people adjusted, and what do you find works really, really well for you and Opera, for you when you were ING, working with these sort of big disparate teams and making sure that products are being developed and being released in the best possible way?
I couldn't agree with more with you, Darren. First of all, some of the companies are prepared for this better, some of them worse, especially with the IT teams, developer teams who are building the digital products. This seems to be a not big problem because a lot of them are, like you said, in different parts of the world. As Opera, we have teams in Sweden, in Estonia. Also, some of them are in Poland and also in Africa. So it's quite common to have daily stand-ups, planning or closing the sprints via video. So those people are usually equipped. What we need to remember also that not everyone is equipped with a laptop that he or she can bring to home and work from home. A lot of companies are still using the stationary PCs, and this is a problem then for those companies to create this environment for their employees to bring their machines home and work from there. And this is a big challenge. But if we deal with that, and we have already our teams working from home from different destinations, I think something that it's similar to the question about the testing. When you talk with your team, the body language is super important. And with current technology, even with the high definition video, you will never see how your teammates react to your proposals, how they react to the new ideas what you will do. So I think this is the biggest challenge, and the way how I try to solve it, and I know other friends of mine are doing the same. Try to find a time for one-on-one meetings. Meetings on video, they will not replace face-to-face conversation in the physical world. But when I have someone on the other side and it's only one person, I can go into conversation a little bit deeper and try to understand what is the problem and how we can plan the next steps. The problems starts with number of people on the video conference. When I have, at least from my experience, if I have more than 3 people on the conference, then it's quite hard to manage this kind of conversation. And everyone wants to say something, and of course, speaking more loudly, it's not helping. It's only disturbing. But this is not the case when we have one-on-one. So in this kind of situation of total lockdown, I see that people really appreciate that you find this time, even for 15, 20, 30 minutes of conversation, really one-on-one. And I think those conversations are the closest to those conversations face-to-face. But I'm looking forward to the moment where I can really physically visit those teams, fly to Sweden or to Tallinn and just meet with them, also in the bigger group, and discuss what we're doing next, because it really helps in this digital world to conduct the project and to build the product itself.
Yeah, sure. I think there is also, technology. We look at technology. We look at emerging technology. I think I've mentioned it on my last webinar, and I'm going to mention it again. It's not a plug because I won't mention the company name. But looking at virtual reality and seeing how you can use VR and augmented reality when it comes to certainly to physical products. It comes to getting feedback from people. I think that might be timing for that now. I know VR's been probably about as useful as 3D TVs when they first came out, but I think there's a real case for this now, and technology is moving on a lot. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what emerges from this crisis in terms of innovative collaboration products. Yeah. Okay, we're going to go on to the Paytm case study. Piotr, we can extend this by 15 minutes if you have time. So we're sort of 28 minutes in. So if you want to talk through this, I'll open up this timeline, and then you can maybe talk us through why you wanted to discuss Paytm and their model.
Sure. I think this is a great example of a company, a digital company that faced very important thing what happened in India, and how they really adjusted to the current situation. And I'm not saying that it's a rule book that we should all follow, but I think it's a really nice example on how to not give up and how to seize the opportunity. I would like to not use this wording of opportunity and how to find opportunity in the current virus situation, but how really to adjust the product and how to benefit not only the company, but also your users. So I have just 2 slides, and I will focus on those ones. If you don't know the Paytm, it's a digital wallet in India that was launched in 2000. And they started from a very simple thing. They allowed the users to pay their bills in the app and through the browser. They targeted this those customers, because they saw that this is a really big pain for the customers in India to go to the kiosk, to go to the post office, to go to the grocery shop and pay for their bills. So if you think it's a feature, it's not full-fledged banking or full-fledged app that people will use, but they targeted very particular problem. And with every year they were expanding the portfolio of the features. And something that they went through, they build on the needs and pains of the customers. So they are reacting to the needs of the market. And something that really happened, in what was a breakthrough for Paytm, happened in 2016. And what happened in 2016, of course, I'm talking about the banknote, the demonetization. What does it mean? It means that the government in 2016 in India, they decided to take out from the market the banknotes that they had 500 and 1,000 rupees on it. And the idea to take those banknotes from the market was to really reduce the use of illicit and counterfeit cash on the market, because it was very easy to print it out and make them illegal. But the problem was that the announcement of the demonetization was followed by prolonged cash shortages, which means people didn't have a small amount of monies to pay for the daily groceries, for fish on the market, for bread, for drinks, and all those kind of things. So imagine in your country that you cannot pay, you can pay for those small things, but there is no change. People don't have this small amount of money to pay for the small things. And this, of course, made a lot of fuss in the country, but also pushed a lot of people to the mobile payments, to the cashless way of making the transactions. And Darren, if you can put the next slide, I think it really summarized what happened in India. So if you think about the demonetization itself, it brings a lot of chaos in India, because people had to give back money to the bank. The new banknotes were not ready, but still the people need to make purchases. So Paytm used this opportunity and seized the opportunity to promote their cashless wallet and to pay through it for the small things. And the way how it used it was, it's still based on the QR code. So if I want to pay to some kind of merchant on the market, I just need to scan its QR code, which is printed, or he's showing it on my mobile device, and the funds are transferred from my wallet to his wallet. So it's fully cashless. There's no banknotes involved at all. And what happened when this demonetization started? Paytm started to make a really big promotion that it's not a problem for them. If you don't have a cash to pay for your daily shop of daily groceries, you can use Paytm for that. And what's happened? Automatically, those small merchants started to register for the wallet. And on the slide, we can see that 80 days after the demonetization was announced, almost more than 1 million merchants signed up for the service. So imagine that your app is getting this super amount of new users in just 80 days. It's huge amount. What happened also with the customers also realized that they can pay their favorite shops not using the banknotes that they were taken from the market, but with the app, the Paytm. And also the volumes increased almost more than 3 times. And also the user base in 2 months grew approximately by 20%. So you can see how big impact it had on the app. And of course, it didn't come by itself, but Paytm invested quite a lot in the marketing, but it was, let's say, in the right moment, in the right time, in the right place to promote this kind of service. And of course, it also initiated hiring of a staff, and they increased aggressively the team, almost doubling the headcount in 2016. So summing up the Paytm, I think it was a great solution before the banknote demonetization, but the situation that government provided helped them to promote the service, and they seized the opportunity to to make it widely accepted. And as far as I know now, it's super popular thing to pay in India by Paytm, and probably they would come to this place where we are right now sooner or later. But this crisis with the shortage of cash in India, they really use this opportunity to grow extremely fast in a very short period of time. So I think this is a great example of the app, of the digital product, that it's not giving up, but it's really looking for the opportunities in different ways.
Absolutely. So it's very much, seize the day, carpe diem, seize the opportunity. And, if there's anything to learn by Paytm is that obviously they've been around a long time. But due to the restrictions or the changes in regulations in India, they saw that as an opportunity rather than just sort of closing up and thinking that their business was going to be eroded. They pivoted quite extremely successfully, and now to get almost 90% mobile share is pretty phenomenal, right?
Yeah, that's right. And of course, we need to not forget about it that they had already a product on the market. So it was like a well-tested product that was ready already for the huge expansion. It can be a different story if you have a new product.
Right. So, Simon, anything to add on that? I mean, there's obviously a few different case studies, Paytm being a great one in India. Anything sort of resonate with you, or you feel is comparable to what you've seen in Europe or the States or any other markets?
No, I think the pivoting thing is absolutely right. It does come back, to being, it comes back to sort of two things, I think, for me. One is a mindset thing, seeing that, accepting that there are going to be challenges in any way, and when there are big challenges outside your control, taking that as an opportunity to, to seize that crisis as a moment for, to create something good out of your company. And the second thing is back to your point on the team front, really. I think last week, Piotr, actually, Andreas said the same thing about meetings, one-to-one meetings, absolutely. I think you can do bigger group meetings online too, but you do need a strong, stiff chairman to make sure it's kept to order and to time. But I think the point to make really is that, particularly if you're an earlier stage company, or you're building something, or you're building a business, it all comes down to ownership. I think one can do these things, one can go through these really difficult moments, pivot the product, do something different in it, or go on in a completely new direction, providing you've got a team that feels that they have ownership of something. They've got a stake, a personal, possibly even a physical, equity stake in the business. But the key to me is ultimately that you need to find a team that's got to be, they feel that the product is part of theirs, and they don't want to let it die. So they'll pivot or pivot accordingly, or respond to developments as they arise.
Fantastic, thanks, Simon. Some good advice there. I don't know if anyone's got any questions. We've got 5 or 6 minutes left. If there's any questions, please do just pop them into the Q&A box. In the meantime, as we're waiting for anything to come through, Piotr, any other sort of tips? You mentioned, the sort of working or having those daily or one-to-one conversations, which is massively important. We've spoken about building agile products. Anything else, without obviously giving away any IP? Is there anything else you could perhaps recommend as some insightful takeaways from this webinar?
Yes, I think one very general thing that people tend to forget, and it's not about if you are building a product, or you work for legal, or you work for any other part of your business, it's when you are in the lockdown, and I see it already on myself, let's try to keep the routine of the day, which is, I think, super important. When I talk with the colleagues, they said that it's like a groundhog day, every day is exactly the same. We discussed it a couple of times, that every day is exactly the same. Let's keep this routine, that if we would go normally to the office, let's take a breaks for the coffee. Let's have a break and contact with our teammates, just to have a chit chat that you would have normally in the office. And I think this would help us to not get crazy, I think, in those times right now.
And then from a product perspective, if you are in the middle of developing a new product or revamping something, how would you advise on getting some feedback? Whilst focus groups, you may not be able to do that physically, is there a slightly watered down version? Is there something you could do in the interim?
Yeah, I think something that we do right now, it's like a lot of testing is going internally. It's going with our friends from the different departments that we know, and they can really honestly say what's working, what it's not. And I think in the future, if the lockdown will still persist, we will go to the friends and family, so people with whom we have a contact, and we can, in the limited capacity, meet face to face. Of course, it will not replace the full market tests, but this is something that we have and we need to do in this limited environment, I would say.
And also, I think it depends on who your customer is, and if it's consumers at a mass market, it's a little different. But if it's if you're in the B2B space, you can get hold of people in a way that you haven't been able to get hold of people in, I couldn't tell you how long. You can actually have conversations with senior people, much more readily. They are more available. So, obviously that depends on how well connected one might be. But I mean, on the assumption that we're talking to an audience that that's a professional audience that knows what they're doing and they've got some expertise in what they're trying to do. I think you still can get qualitative feedback over the via a call. It doesn't have to be just about online surveys and stuff, but of course it does depend on it depends on your target customer.
Sure. Simon, a question for you actually. This is from Shelley in Cape Town. So what surprised you most about the impact of coronavirus on the payments or fintech industry?
Well, I suppose it's a bit early to say what surprised me the most. I mean, I think I think what's most worrying, of course, is this whole thing of we've had 10 years since the financial crisis. We've had a good 10 years of explosive technology growth, and a lot of companies formed, which is wonderful. It's always good to see startup activity, but a lot of things and stuff being produced which don't necessarily have a solid base. And it worries me a little bit that that we still get into this kind of crazy bubble cycle to that degree. So I think going forward for me, I would like to see a kind of step change here, where things like open banking, PSD2, and this kind of move in other industries to data sharing, where we can start to see a much greater connectivity in terms of data connectivity, so that we can become more aware of some of the threats, and we can become a little bit less concerned about just growing a business for the sake of growing a business, and creating products for which there is real need. I think it's going to be we've got a couple of months before we see what the real impact has been, I think, on fintech as a whole, and it will certainly differ in different regions. Latin America is going to suffer very heavily. African companies, although Africa has a sort of track record of responding to or needing to be resilient anyway, there are going to be impacts. Asia too, and equally, a lot of fintech companies in the UK and the rest of Europe are going to be stressed by this. But I think for me, it's really about we've got to get to a situation where we've got the data at our disposal, so that we can either be prepared for problems coming down the line, or at least build our businesses to be more prepared, or enough data that we can actually start to more easily create products for which there is a genuine demand or need.
Right. And Piotr, from your side, what do you think, what the biggest impact's been for you?
For me personally, or for the opera, because I cannot say both about them.
No, it's up to you. You can choose to answer that question.
Well, I think saying in general about the payments, and this is something that we are doing also at Opera, it will impact in the positive way, I would say. People will tend, like, for example of Paytm, I think they will spend on different things, but I doubt if they will spend less, and they will move to those kind of different types of payments with putting the cash outside. and looking for the solution that will make the payment seamless and easy to use, both in e-commerce and also in-store shops. So everyone who is building any solution based on the payment schemes, I think, will be a winner in a short or long-term period of time, because people will tend to change their payment habits because of the situation right now. And this is something that I see already is happening, and will be heavily promoted also after the pandemic will end.
Thank you very, very much, gentlemen. So that brings us to the end. Just to recap on the 6-week series, we've got another one next Tuesday. I think it's a slightly different time, but that's again how to remain in control of your payments business, and that's from a private equity expert, Nick from Mavis Partners. Please do join us then. We'll be following up with this afternoon as soon as I've got the recording downloaded and uploaded into YouTube. We'll share this with you as well as the deck. If you have any questions, you can certainly find Simon at Findexible. And Simon, sorry, we just wanted to mention a webinar that we're running or you're running tomorrow. Do you just want to give a quick moment on that?
Absolutely, please. Yeah, thanks, Darren. So we'll back tomorrow actually. Darren and I and a host of fintech specialists, commentators from across Africa, talking about the impact of coronavirus on the marketplace as a whole, and how African fintech is responding, and some takeaways in terms of how to think about building a more resilient business for future crises, which I think we have to expect that there's going to be other things coming down the line at some point. So we'll be back tomorrow. That's at registrations at findexible.com. It's 9 a.m. South Africa time, 8 a.m. London. As I say, it's Darren will be joining me and some people from the African fintech scene, and hope you can make it. Thanks, Darren.
Simon, I'll tell you what I'll do. When we follow up with the email, I'll pop a link to the registration page for the webinar as well.
Nice one. Good. Thanks, Darren.
Brilliant. Piotr, thank you so much for your time. I know how sort of challenging these times are, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with our community today. Thank you. If anyone doesn't know who Opera is, you really should do. I'm sure it's probably on your handset already if you're somewhere in Africa, but please look at Opera software, opera.com. And Piotr, thank you very much. Simon, thank you very much. Please stay safe, and I look forward to speaking again in the near future.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks for a great conversation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.